the folks, along with Michael Martella here, who founded this place and started growing grapes and making wine. And we have our wine grower, Nathan Candler, here as well, and founding winemaker, Michael Martella. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Like I said, this is becoming disturbingly comfortable and surprisingly familiar and kind of easy to do. We're enjoying it. People seem to be enjoying it. We've got folks from all over the country trying the wines with us. They can't make it to some of our events. We're happy to see people back, getting a good flow of questions and answers going, and we're enjoying it. Today we are going to try two non-estate single vineyard Pinot Noirs. Nathan, you want to talk about the two wines we're going to try?
Yeah, so we're going to taste through basically now the two vineyards outside of our estate that we buy Pinot Noir from in Santa Cruz Mountains. The first is La Vida Bella Vineyard. This is the vineyard owned by Joe Quink and Pam Minnis out in Corralitos, which is the southernmost part of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it's much lower in elevation, but very, very close to the ocean, just above the fog line. It's a nice little kind of banana belt. It's a really, really cool place to grow Pinot Noir, very kind of meager, sandy soils. The wines from that area, I think, are really pretty. They're red fruited, they're spicy, real floral. I think it's a really interesting contrast to the fruit we grow here up on Skyline. And then also, the second wine we'll taste is Mindigo Ridge Vineyard. This is a single vineyard Pinot Noir from a vineyard in the town of La Honda, which is kind of, I guess, sort of just to the west of us here. Another really, really fascinating place to grow Pinot Noir in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Really warm days, but most importantly, very cold nights, so huge diurnal swings. The fruit from that area tends to be darker, really high acidities, really, really fascinating place to grow Pinot. And Michael, you've been making Pinot from Corralitos for on and off for a long time, kind of, huh?
Yeah, I think we started, what, about 15 years ago, doing a little bit from Corralitos. Various vineyards. I think we kind of settled on just the one Bella Vida for now. Is that correct? At one time we were doing about like 3 different vineyards from Corralitos, 3 or 4. Tried different things.
Yeah, in 2012.
Yeah, we just felt we were most happy with the Bella Vida vineyard. And the different clones that they have is very diverse vineyard. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that vineyard.
Yeah, we started working with that vineyard, I think, in 2011 when it was owned by the previous owners. And then in 12, I think Joe and Pam purchased the vineyard. Yeah. And then we've been with them ever since. That's been great. And then the Mindigo Ridge Vineyard, we've been making wine at the winery since 2012. Fogerty Winery didn't actually make any wine in 12, but we made Dave and Stacy's wine here at that time. So we've been making wines from both of those sites for about the same amount of time.
Yeah, I think, we probably made the very first wines off that vineyard, I believe. We did the first crop. So we're really familiar with that vineyard.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot of time out in that vineyard, walking it. It's also another diverse vineyard. There's a lot of different clones, different aspects. It's a pretty hilly, steep vineyard, different aspects to the vineyard.
Yeah, I think this will be an interesting comparison because I think the wines are both very different, but showcase kind of the different ways in which Pinot Noir can be excellent, but stylistically very different. But the overall level of quality can be really high. So it should be a fun way to compare and contrast the two. Should we jump right in?
So we are going to do Bella Vida first?
Yeah, I think so.
So for a little bit of historical stuff, going back to okay. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to a little bit of historical stuff, our original vineyards that were planted here in the late 70s, early 80s, planted by my father and then Michael when he came to join, were all Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and we grew Pinot Noir from Rapley Trail and Windy Hill for a long time before we even got the idea to do non-estate single vineyard wines. And it's kind of goes back to the fascination with Pinot Noir that was kind of one of the motivations for my dad to start this place. And this is kind of a continued exploration of what can be had in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And, you know, I mean, those that know really know and understand, but very few really do take the time to know. But Santa Cruz Mountain Pinot Noir is a very specific and unique and great contribution to the wine world, I think.
So this is a great slide of the vineyard. We're kind of looking to the southeast, do you think, Nathan?
Well, that's from the very entrance or the bottom of the vineyard. That's from the 115 block, looking up the hill to Richard Alfaro's place in the far distance.
Yes, I see that now.
That may be northish. I'm not positive of the aspect in that area, but that's basic. That's a great shot because you're seeing almost every vine on the property. You have there's a block of clone 115 Pinot Noir, and then a block of 114, and then the block of 113. Okay, yeah.
There you go.
So that view was from the bottom left-hand corner of the vineyard. And so that's the block map. There's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay there. I think there's about 7 acres of Pinot Noir. There's a little bit of Chardonnay in the cellar this year for the first time from 2019, which is looking really, really cool. So a little sneak preview. In a couple of years, there may be a Thomas Fogerty Winery, La Vida Bella Vineyard Chardonnay, a few barrels to have a look at. But you know, this is a 2016 vintage. This is the last year of the drought. Really lovely wine. I love the aromatics. It's super floral, red fruited.
That is a very detailed vineyard map, the likes of which.
What do you think, Martella?
It's got really some interesting flavors. It's definitely a little bit on the still kind of a really young, bright wine. But it's very transparent. It's not really convoluted. It's very nice, crisp, clean wine.
I really like the 16 from this vineyard. Like you said, it's still got a little bit of youthful tannin, but really bright, red fruited. The wines from that vineyard, I think, have continued to get better and better every year we've worked with it. I know Joe, who kind of farms the vineyard and owns it, has put a lot of work into the vines and into the health of the soil. And I think it really shows through in the wine. And every year, I think the wines just continue to get better and better. And that's really cool to see as working with that vineyard and be able to have such a relationship with it over the years. It's awesome to see how the wine improves.
It's the next best thing to owning the vineyard.
Right.
Joe gives us a lot of, allows us to have a lot of input on that vineyard.
Some questions already. Matt Ryan, back again. It's good to see you, Matt. He says, are there general characteristics that you find in different Pinots grown across the area of the Santa Cruz Mountains, Corralitos, Skyline, Summit? Somewhat. I think in general, to me, wines from Corralitos tend to be a little more red fruited. They tend to be usually a little lower in tannin. Really floral, really bright. They're grown in sand, so they have a lot of vibrancy and energy. do you think, Martella?
No, I was going to say they're a little bit, when they're younger wines, they're a little pretty wines.
Yep.
Whereas the more Santa Cruz Mountains, the Skyline area, they tend to be a little more brooding, or a little more, they're darker fruit definitely, and a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I find the wines from up here more structured, and they have kind of like a little more of a wilder kind of savory element to them. And then the wines from out where Dave's at, that kind of stretch out in the Mindigo Ridge Vineyard, Dave and Stacy, those wines are dark. I mean, they're really dark Pinot Noirs with really vibrant kind of electric fruit, a lot of structure too. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of regional characteristics to all those parts of the Santa Cruz Mountains. I think that's one of the things that makes it exciting.
The Mindigo Ridge tends to be a little bit more, like you said, they're kind of more intense, and and they get really very big wines without doing a lot of extraction. Who was that? Was that Stacy? Who was that? Was that Stacy?
That's Pam Minnis, who's one of the owners of La Vida Bella.
Well, it's Pam. There you go.
Yeah, I believe so. There's Joe. That's his dog. Is just awesome. Mastiff. That guy is cool. Having a great dog at your vineyard, I'm not going to lie, is a big plus.
Yeah.
How would we know?
Yeah.
We have no way of knowing that. That's strictly speculation. There's another question. Well, we'll go back to contrasting the 16 vintage relative to the other Bella Vida vintages. But the banana belt, John brings up the banana belt down there, how it's kind of a little warm area. Corralitos is very, very close to the ocean, and you really feel what's happening on the coast in those vineyards. But yeah, Corralitos is warm enough that where this vineyard is, at least, is warm enough that you can reliably ripen this fruit. But there is a brightness and an acidity, kind of an edginess to the wine, even though it's warm, I guess, relatively speaking, in that spot. Nathan, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, when I say banana belt, it's all relative. You know, it's only 4 miles from the ocean, right? And I think it's at about a little over 400 feet elevation. And if you were to come down out of Corralitos, get closer to the Pacific, you'd have a really, really hard time, I think, growing grapes in that area. So it's like, when I say banana belt, it's this area that's just far enough away from the sea and just high enough in elevation that you can, you know, there have been apples planted in Corralitos for a long, long time. So it's been growing fruit for a while. So
now, Corralitos is really interesting area. If you have not gone to visit that area, it's really worth going to. There's a lot of diversity as for farming down there. There's apples, there's lots of strawberries, and it's really a pretty interesting little area right in there. And then there's also there's the Corralitos Market, which has the great the great sausage sandwiches.
right, having a good dog at your vineyard and having a great deli or market near your vineyard is also a big plus.
Right.
Somebody's asking about how 16 compares with other vintages. We've talked a lot about in the last couple of these little virtual tastings about the 16 vintage. We've tasted a lot of wines from it. I think, you know, the wines tend to be a little concentrated from the drought, but still have really bright acidities. They're pretty intense wines. I like how this wine balances in intensity, but also still really fresh and bright.
You know, John Benedetti, sorry, keep myself unmuted. John Benedetti is joining us again. Welcome, John. He's a great wine grower down there, San Arcangeli. He's mentioning that the skins tend to be thinner in Coralitos. I don't know how much of a generalization that is, but that there maybe is a little bit less extraction, and so you get a little bit lighter color, and might contribute to sort of the kind of the filigree and femininity of some of the Coralitos Pinot Noirs.
Well, I think that does contribute to the Pinot Noirs being really pretty. They're really pretty wines.
We should have said this in the beginning, but if you do have questions, if you could put them in the Q&A rather than the chat, it's a little easier for us to follow them in the Q&A. The chat kind of sometimes moves a little fast to keep up. So throw your questions in the Q&A, and then we should be able to get to hopefully all of those. Matt Ryan asks about who else La Vida Bella sells grapes to. We buy all the Pinot Noir. Joe does make a little wine, so there is a little bit of La Vida Bella, Pinot, and Chardonnay. And the Chardonnay, now I think Lioco used to get some. I'm not sure if they are getting any longer. But they have been making wine from there, and also a brand called Trail Marker, which are some really cool wines. They buy Chardonnay from that vineyard. So those are the other wines. We oftentimes pick these grapes at night. I think we've got a couple cool pics of how we harvest at night. Dushan's going to bring those up here at night. So for those of you that have never seen how grapes are picked, this is kind of the way in California, especially in these warmer years that we harvest. We bring these huge lights out into the vineyard, and we start picking basically very, very early in the morning, around 4 in the morning. It's kind of harder to get up, but it's a lot nicer to work. The temperatures are much cooler, and then the quality of the fruit that comes off is just awesome at that time. The fruit's more intact, it's cold, it gets to the winery in great shape. And somebody asked if we ever consider doing clone-specific Pinots. We probably thought about it, but I think we make better wines when we actually like to ferment the clones together rather than keep them separate if we can. Sometimes that logistically that's hard, and clones, for those of you who don't know, are selections of Pinot Noir. They because grapevines are so genetically kind of unstable, we propagate. Like a lot of fruits, we propagate them asexually, so we don't plant them from seeds, right? We take cuttings, we graft. And because Pinot Noir is even more genetically diverse than a lot of grapes, there are all these different things called clones. And basically, it's just different types of Pinot Noir. The clusters may be bigger or smaller, the berries bigger or smaller. And so these clones, I think at La Vida Bella, there are 5 clones of Pinot, and they're all a little bit different. I mean, they all share some common characteristics, but it's nice kind of having the different kind of expressions of Pinot. I think we've got through most of the questions. Anybody else have any final words on the La Vida Bella? It's one of my favorite Pinots we make here. I think it drinks really, really well in its youth. And we've got the wine going back till 12, and it seems like it ages really well too. So it's a fun wine.
See, Sean is asking how you could tell the location of the vineyard by looking at the label. And I guess we don't specify the location within the Santa Cruz Mountains. I think the labels just show the Santa Cruz Mountains and identifies the vineyard, but not the location of the vineyard. Is there any thought to changing that?
To actually putting
I suppose it's possible to put La Bella Vida, Coralitos, Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah, I guess we could do that. I don't know. When you start putting like regional names that aren't legal, I don't know if you
can do that or not.
I don't know. That's a good question. John Benedetti, can you put Coralitos on the label? Can you hear us, John? He might answer. Hopefully he'll.
John's probably already left us.
Yeah, he might be. He might be bored already. John says he does. He puts it on the back label. So we will consider that. If you go to our website, I think we should have that information on the website. So you can check that out. Do we have any further questions on Corralitos? Somebody asked, does the Monterey Trench impact Corralitos? And certainly the Monterey Bay impacts all of the Santa Cruz Mountains, I would say. It's a large body of cold water right off the coast. All right, should we move on to Mindigo Ridge?
Thanks, Nathan. And we all are aware, I believe Joe Quink is in. He's in the participants list. If anyone has questions that we can't answer about that vineyard, we can go back, I suppose. Well, right off the bat, this is what we were saying about sort of the thinner skins and a little bit less pigment and a little more of a kind of a very beautiful, detailed, brighter red fruited style in Corralitos versus what I call the North Skyline part of the Santa Cruz Mountains is pretty evident right here. Hopefully, a bunch of you have both wines in front of you and they're both open. Obviously, when people buy these wines and sign up for the webinar, we can get you the wines in time to try them both. No law that says you have to do that. Obviously, you can listen and participate and try the wines later. But if you are trying them back to back right now, the Vida Bella and the Mindigo, you're seeing exactly what Nathan and Michael were talking about, where the just kind of these very distinct, subtle but very distinct character differences between the Corralitos fruit and the North Skyline fruit are really evident right here.
I see Matt Ryan asked an interesting question: is how did Thomas Fogerty Winery become a Pinot Noir producer? And it came about for a couple of reasons. One is Dr. Fogerty really did like Pinot Noir. He one of the first wines he really got into, but also our location back in the late 70s and in the 80s, we could probably only ripen Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So we were really somewhat limited to what we can grow. Things have warmed up since then, but back at the beginning, it's so cold up here that we really needed early ripening varieties.
The truth is, when my father decided to plant grapes and make wine, he didn't know a ton about wine. He was from Cincinnati and was familiar really with like beer and bourbon and things. Didn't drink a ton, but he knew a little bit about wine, and he knew the folks at Ridge. And I think when he sort of conceptualized this, his intent was actually to grow Cabernet. And then I think David Bruce himself was the one who sort of disabused my dad of that notion and said, you know what, you're not going to be able to do that, but you don't want to do that anyway, because you really want to be planting Pinot Noir, because David Bruce was very much evangelical about Pinot Noir in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And David Bruce and a couple of Norman Shumway, a guy at Stanford at that time, and a few other people that knew my dad, like kept bringing him bottles of Burgundy, really nice Burgundy. And so my dad was like, okay, you guys have convinced me. We'll do Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. For some reason, the first vineyards that were planted were Chardonnay, and I'm not totally sure why that is. Might have been as simple as just availability of grafting material. I don't know, but Chardonnay and Pinot Noir was appropriate, and that's what was done.
And George Burton's was also a big influence on your dad back in the early days.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm sure he threw out some good bottles of Burgundy.
Yeah.
To do the convincing too.
Hey, Michael, Kurt asked, did Fogerty sell grapes in the beginning?
We did sell some grapes at the beginning, not a lot, but we sold, actually we sold Barry Jackson some grapes for Champagne based back in the 80s. We sold some, we may have sold some to the Varners at one time or another.
Did you sell some grapes to, his name escapes me, our neighbor down in on Old La Honda?
Not Cronin.
Yeah, Dwayne. Didn't
Okay,
you sell
yeah,
some Pinot to Dwayne?
We may have sold some wine, some grapes to Dwayne. That's right.
Yeah, Dwayne Cronin. He should be mentioned as often as possible. True. He's a Portola Valley, wine grower and Santa Cruz Mountains, OG, and made some really neat wines. And we did sell fruit to him.
He made he made some fabulous wines.
Yeah.
Certainly the first Santa Cruz Mountain winemaker to get his face on the cover of Wine Spectator.
Only. Probably still the
way
only.
Before David Brew. Yeah, the only, maybe the only. That's right.
So we have, I believe Dave Golnick is here. And if he promises to comport his behavior and his language to something that is acceptable to the general population, we could unmute him and he could tell us a little bit. He could spin his web of lies about his vineyard for us.
You're asking a lot from Dave.
Yeah, I know, Tommy. Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction. Good to see everyone, especially you, Michael. I never get to see you.
It's a great virtual background you have there, Dave.
Yeah, well, it's just a poster. You can buy it online.
I have 3 of them. So someone in the question and answer box asked how we started our relationship with both these vineyards, and Nathan kind of already spoke to how we started working with Bella Vida. But Dave, since you're here, we'll get your perspective on how we started working with you guys.
Well, Tommy and I met at a Scientology convention. That's where it all started.
Yeah, right.
It
did you guys a lot of good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're happy as clams, Martella.
No, it was just maybe a couple years in. The Santa Cruz Mountains is truly a community of growers. It's really refreshing coming from the tech industry to see the true community and collaborative nature of all the growers here. And I got to know Tommy early on through a couple of different contacts, but Tommy looked at the vineyard and it's probably back in 2000, maybe 11 or 12. We planted in 2009, and what's behind me is just an acre and a half of Chardonnay. The Pinot is up the hill. I'm sitting at about 700 feet elevation and about 8 miles from the Pacific. There's
vineyards it's a big cycle when it comes to vineyards, and it's somebody used this analogy with me talking about really old vintage guitars, and it goes for cars or whatever. It's like, look, the reality is construction techniques are better now, and we learn things all the time, and development happens, and if you look at something that's built right now, it's built better in a lot of ways if it's built as well as it can be, which things unfortunately often aren't. But modernity is good when it comes to like figuring out how to do things. As humans, we learn. But vine age is super, super important. So there's this thing that happens where, we planted our vineyards in the 70s, and now our vineyards have 40 years of vine age, which is really, really, really critical and good, and it can't really be replaced. But then you sort and vineyards, of course, have to be replanted periodically. After so many decades, you replant. And so to me, when I look at the Mindigo Ridge vineyards, I'm like, wow, that's really zoomy. There's a lot of stuff here that I wish we had in our vineyards. But of course, they don't yet have the vine age. So eventually, as we grow older and we have to replant, the Mindigo Ridge vineyards with like, optimal spacing and neat ideas for, how you can farm it, all the practical aspects have been applied. That vineyard will become like, to me, it's the heir apparent to being like the North Santa Cruz or North Skyline area Pinot Noir vineyard, at some point when the vine age gets to a certain point, for sure. There's a lot of vineyards planted around here that are like almost like show pony vineyards. The spacing is tiny and the head heights are super, super low. They're super neat vineyards, but from a practical farming standpoint, they are not really workable. There's a great shot of the Mindigo Ridge place. I mean, it's just right. It's kind of like, it's not so narrow that every time you have to get in the vineyard, you roll your eyes and curse. But it's narrow enough, and the head height is workable and the exposures are good. And it's, the terraces aren't messed up yet because the vineyard's fairly new, and it's just a nice vineyard.
Well,
Yeah.
it's very nice of you, Tommy, but it's a practical thing here. I farm it, and I don't want to farm something that is difficult to farm. I want to make it as practical and simple as possible to farm. So that really dictated the vine, at least the row spacing, so that we can, one practical thing is when we harvest, it's just really efficient to harvest and take the macro bin up and down the rows. And at 7-foot spacing, you can get up and down the rows and follow the guys, and nobody has to carry picking lugs. It might sound like a small thing, but it's when you hand pick everything, it's a big deal when you have to carry stuff up and down roads with pretty steep slope, or average around 25% slope here. So
Dave's vineyard's beautiful, but it doesn't have rainbows.
That is true.
Running through your
in
ears.
your face, Golnick.
I know. Oh wow.
And we're already done with harvest.
Good stuff. Hey, David asks, tell us best memories or stories about working with one of these vineyards. Nathan mentioned we harvest late at night, and I've got some great memories of going down to Golnick's place around midnight. It's not far from here, which is nice, right? Sometimes when we're traveling to the vineyards that we use, we're going a long, long ways. Golnick's is, what is it, maybe 25 minutes, Dave, in a car? If you're
the day you forgot your
drone
the battery to your drone, I think you got up and back in about 25 minutes. So I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, that was unreasonable, and I won't do that again. But it's not that far.
Yeah, it's as the crow flies, it's probably 3.5 or 4 miles, but it's 20 to 25 minutes if you're driving like a sane person.
Yeah, but going down there sometimes towards the end of the summer when we're harvesting, we've got, it's not terribly cold at night, so it's just beautiful out. And I mean, there have been nights where I've gone to and from our own vineyards in the middle of the night or the early morning hours, from here to Mindigo and back 3 or 4 times in a night, and it's just always beautiful out. That's fantastic. Another great memory about the Mindigo Ridge vineyards is not ever having to drive the grapes out of there ourselves. Dave brings them in a truck, which is, that's one of the, getting back to the unromantic practical aspects of farming and growing grapes in these Santa Cruz mountains. Schlepping around in the middle of the night all the time with, trucks that are I mean, we would never drive an overloaded truck, but they're awfully close sometimes. And having the grapes show up in an air-conditioned trailer the next morning after the pick is pretty damn nice.
It's part of the service we provide.
It's appreciated. So, there's a bunch of questions. Nathan, you want to tackle David's question about the qualities and characteristics you look for when you choose a vineyard?
Sure. I mean, well, we could probably do an entire hour on that, but I mean, the most important thing usually is who's the person that's farming a vineyard and what are they trying to do, and do you get along with them? And that's why I like working with Dave and Joe, is that they're just nice people. They're trying to do the best job they can of something that's incredibly challenging. Growing really, really high quality Pinot Noir in the Santa Cruz Mountains is really hard. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And, the most important thing is having a good relationship with those people. And so that's the first thing, then having a great site, good soils, good thought into how the vineyard was planted, and just having a similar philosophy about looking for quality and trying to make sure that what you're looking for and what the grower is attempting to do kind of match up. And there's no one formula, but being able to have a good conversation and share a joke and a laugh is important. What do you think, Michael?
No, it's interesting. I thought you were going to start off by the location with how the grapes are grown, but you start off with the person you're buying the grapes from, and that really is where I started. You got to really enjoy the people you work with, and have confidence that they're really as into quality as you are, because it's a team effort.
So despite all that, we still choose to work with Dave, even though.
Well, Dave's the exception.
Dave, what do you from your end? What's it like? You work with a few different wineries. What's it? I mean, I think it's always the wineries that are, there's like the joke, they're always complaining about the growers or stuff, but from the growers, I'm sure they're like, oh my God, these winemakers are insane. They're like rats running around my vineyard. What do you come out on that?
Well, it's I don't know if that's someone else's experience. It's definitely not mine. Honestly, I've learned a lot about farming from you, Nathan. Nathan's very involved, since you buy quite a bit of what we grow here. You guys purchase, so my ears are always open when Nathan comes and walks the property, and I always end up learning a lot. He's like, for instance, when we start pruning, he's here with the crew and giving some insight, answering questions. But yeah, during harvest is it's kind of a crazy time for everyone. Everyone's a little bit on edge because all the growers a few of the other growers that we sell to, they're managing grapes from a dozen or more different vineyards and trying to keep track of everything. But we're really fortunate in that we share the same crew. We share the crew from Reese, and we've never missed a pick yet. The most important decision we make all year, or I make with some of the winemakers, is what day is it that we pick. And I'm constantly taking samples up to Fogerty, up to Nathan, and whenever things are ready, Nathan tells me, and if it's the next day, the crew's here. So it's a challenging time because in in our case, so Stacy and I, you mentioned night picks. We start at, sometimes we'll start at midnight and go all night. And then if it's a trip up to Fogerty, that's easy for us. If it's a trip to up to the North Bay, that's another thing. And so sometimes we're up for 24 hours and then followed by another pick. So it's a challenging time, but I enjoy working with all the winemakers. I always learn something.
So after this is done, you can tell us how you really feel. That was a made for TV answer, but we'll take it. Let's try to rifle through some of these questions. Somebody asked how you got into the wine business, Dave. I think that's how'd you end up with a vineyard?
So Stacy and I started looking around about now 12, 13 years ago. And, I think to say that we were tech burnouts is probably a few steps too far, but we were looking for something that was a little more sort of soulful and rewarding. And we found this property in late 2008, and sort of jumped off the proverbial cliff here, and put everything we had into all the plantings, and here we are.
Dave is one of the most interesting growers I work with, because you're an engineer, and your mind is the way he solves problems in the vineyard, I think, is awesome. So I have a huge amount of respect for how you operate in and around the vineyard, and the way in which you deal things is just awesome. If you haven't had a chance to get out to Dave and Stacy's place, they don't welcome guests a lot, but if you buy a case of wine, I'm sure they'll let you buy.
Everyone is welcome.
Yeah, it's an awesome vineyard, and it's farmed just meticulously. I mean, and finally we got Bunny and Larry. And again, check another box. Great vineyard dogs.
See, I don't even think those are good dogs.
And that's also a poster you can buy on our website.
Yeah.
I've been around those dogs. My standards may be high, but I'm not. They're okay at best. Monty, okay at best. Lewis, I know, Nathan, you love them, but okay at absolute best.
Terrible dog.
The Quink dog looked pretty good. That might have been a good dog. These dogs are unruly. You can't let them both out at the same time. They'll pack up and cause mayhem. Problem dogs. They're problem dogs. Let's be honest. Have they ever bitten Martella? That's a dog right there.
No.
They've not?
No. Only your dogs.
Has Lewis bitten Martella? Really?
No, Lewis is a very nice dog.
I'm sure he wants to.
You're the only one that owns vicious dogs. They're small, but they're vicious.
Yeah, well, wait till you see my new Rottweiler, Martella. All right, so there are a couple other questions that I'm going to ask. Somebody asked a amount of whole cluster question. We're going to table that until we've got another couple of Pinot tastings coming up. Maybe we can address that then. The soil competition from Todd and Joy. That's a hard one to answer. I don't know if it can be answered, but Nathan, it's kind of an interesting question. They're asking, if you could create the ultimate soil composition and climate for a Pinot Noir, what would it be? And we're at the stage where we're starting to lose participants, so we're going to wrap it up pretty quickly, but we will, as Nathan said, we'll rifle through a few more of these questions.
Before Nathan answers that, I would just add that if you could create the ideal soil, I can guarantee you it will be wrong.
Yeah. This is all trial and error as far as I've ever been able to tell. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. Matt asks, are Fogerty and Mindigo's wines farmed the same? No, but yes. They are not farmed exactly the same, but I think they both have the same sort of aesthetic and philosophy. Might get there a little bit differently, but Dave, somebody asked about, was there an existing vineyard or an orchard, or was it fallow land? What was at your property when you began to plant?
So when we moved in, there was a rancher here that ran cattle probably 50 or more years ago. So it was a cattle ranch, and then it was fallow for, I think, since the late 70s, early 80s, it was fallow. It was just pasture.
Yeah.
So nothing here, but you know, kind of an because of the exposure, you know, we're on a south facing slope, and we're in one of the ravines. I mean, you look at the back of me, it's a coniferous wonderland here, but we're in a watershed, creek watershed, and so when it gets warm in the summertime during the growing season, and you know, say June, July, August, and the warm air, you sort of feel that warm air. It's a matter of hours before all of a sudden the air conditioner turns on, because it starts to pull all that cool air from the Pacific up these watersheds, the San Gregorio Creek and Alpine Creek waterways. It starts to pull that cool air up, and so we get cooled down into the. It can be our typical day in July, August is maybe 85 or 90 during the daytime at the warmest, and into the high 40s, low 50s at night. So that's what really drew us to the property early on, was just that exposure and the proximity to the Pacific.
A couple of other questions here. One, this is a good question that I get kind of a lot. Trent asks, how should you decant these Pinots, is how I'll take the question, and how long before you're going to enjoy them. Decanting Pinot Noir isn't something that people talk a ton about. Usually they're talking about big Cabernets and Barolos and these big super structured wines. But with particularly like Northern Skyline Pinot Noirs, particularly our Rapley Trail, if anybody's familiar with that, decanting it a couple of hours before you're going to enjoy it is not a bad idea. The wines really need to kind of relax and just sort of become a little more mellow and a little more integrated, and being decanted is helpful there. The Mindigo Ridge that we have here, it's changed in the glass for sure. I mean, decanting this wine, I don't think would be a bad idea at all. And then Sean is asking about the oak treatment. They're both they both see oak, some new oak. What are the numbers there, Nathan?
These are both about 25% new oak in this vintage. That's pretty common with us with Pinot Noirs, about 25%. And always French oak, and we like to have a good mix of new barrels, once used barrels, second fill, third fill. So there's a nice kind of range of age in the French oak. We don't like to have a lot of flavor from the oak. It's more of a structural kind of component to the wine, ideally.
I see Christopher kind of asked an interesting question, and that is, how much autonomy does the vineyard owner have, or how much influence does the purchaser of the grape has? And it's more of a mutual working together. It's not. We generally work with people that we like the way they're farming to begin with, so it's not like we have to go out and correct the growers. We don't work with growers who don't have the same philosophy that we have.
Well, likewise, I wouldn't want to work with a winemaker that didn't have the same growing philosophy. So
right. So it's more of a mutual respect for each other and working together.
Well said. Well said.
Any last minute
Does anybody have any last minute comments or questions or, you know, proclamations or accusations or anything like that about any of these wines that we've tried? Anybody want to, I mean, I guess we haven't done it tonight, but over the last 2 or 3 episodes, we've seen every dog affiliated with these vineyards. If you wanted to say which one was your favorite, that would be okay too.
Oh, look. Can I go grab a dog here?
That's probably the biggest change at Fogerty Winery since Nathan's taken over.
Yeah.
Before Nathan, it was always cats.
Yeah. Yeah, it's embarrassing, but at one time we were
The place
cat
really has
winery.
gone to the dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. We were a cat winery at one
We
point.
were for a long time.
I'm comfortable with my legacy, I guess. That's where it
Yeah,
stands.
You've got nothing left to prove, that's for sure.
Come on.
Yeah, dirty pool, Golnick, because we don't have our dogs here. See, now I look like a jerk for calling that a mediocre dog. It looks pretty nice. Is that funny?
That's a beautiful shot of the vineyard.
Steve Chaput asks, is it true that Michael started making wine in 13 BC?
There you go.
There it is.
I never had a lot of hair.
Yeah, it's out of the frame, but there's a stone tablet on the floor that he's looking
Yeah,
at.
right.
It's got instructions on it. Yeah, but yeah, Steve, the truth, the records have been lost to time, but it is about 13 BC.
Who's all in this picture? Barners?
That's Bob and
And the
Jeff-
other guy's you, Martella.
that's me. And Jeff Formersdorf.
Jeff Grimmersdorf. That is Jeff Grimmersdorf. I hope Todd Parmasek is still with us.
I think he
But
bailed.
Oh no, really?
I think so.
Parmasek's gone before a Grimmersdorf photo showed up. Yeah, that's Jeff Grimmersdorf. Who this is in the lower left, I don't know.
The feathering on the hair is second
Yeah.
to none.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are some early shots. Where those shots were taken is now covered. If anybody said, I don't know quite where that is in the winery, I think it's because it was, at that time, it was uncovered and now it is covered.
I think that's right below what is now the tasting room.
Mhm.
One last question really quick we can answer. Somebody asks, is there a specific section of Mindigo that we buy? And I would say not specifically, but we get a little bit of almost every block there. So I would say we split the vineyard, all the blocks with Dave. So we get a little bit of everything there. And that, I think, mostly wraps up. Some of these are questions like, well, we can talk about whole cluster again, maybe next week, because we do use whole cluster in all our Pinots, and we could do a whole cluster conversation. There's a lot to talk about that, but maybe we'll for today, we'll wrap up. It was a great tasting, really interesting contrast. La Vida Bella is one of my favorite wines we make here. Super pretty and aromatic. I love, its representation of the Corralitos region, really kind of delicate ethereal Pinot Noir. And then moving to the Mindigo, which is darker fruited, more structured, a little denser. What are we tasting next week? Next week, I think we're tasting Rapley and Razorback. Yeah, so
Oh, Pinot.
That's where that whole cluster question. That's where that whole cluster question will fit perfectly. So Duchan, maybe you could put up the website, or if anybody is joining us that doesn't have the wines in front of them and would like the wines for next week's tasting, you can reach us here at the winery, 650-851-6777 or thomasfogertywinery.com. And we can get you set up so that you can join us and actually taste the wines in real time. And yeah, next week is Razorback and Rapley, our two original, still originally planted estate Pinot Noir vineyards at the northern estate here. The Rapley Trail being kind of one of the most rare and sought after wines that we do historically.
Dushan put the links for those tastings in the chat there. So if you having trouble finding it, there it is. But that should be a fun tasting. A good contrast from these wines. We'll taste the estate Pinots from 16. Yeah, 16 vintage. Right on.
Yeah, that will be good. That'll be really good.
I guess we'll say thank you again.
Sean's giving us the chop. All right.
Turn it off.
We still have 35 people here, Sean. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See y'all.
There's got to be a way to